This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket, which dares to ask the question, what beer do they serve in Baxter?
Baxter Brewery sells very well up here, and we do try to hold a lot of different Maine brews, Gritty's, Gary's, Shipyard. That would be the best, other than, of course, the local favorite, Bud Light.
Good morning. Earlier this week, I finished up guiding a 5-day tour. Most of it was spent up in the North Woods. I've got the bug bites and beard stubble to prove it. Then, we scooted over to Schoodic and went out to sea for a bit, and I've got the windburn and sunburn to prove it. That tour inspires today's show because there's the soft, easy kind of tourism you can find in Bar Harbor and Boothbay Harbor. Well, really, most of the harbors. And there's the other kind of tourism you get on the wild edges of Maine. It's called many things: ecotourism, nature-based tourism, experiential tourism, adventure tourism. For today, we'll call it that. Sporting camps, remote lodges, inns that also serve as base camps for high adventure, they all provide a different experience. And they've all got to figure out how to take care of guests who are hiking, paddling, fishing, and in my case, birding. We're about to sample it. Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Dysarts, EBS, and Supercuts in Bangor, Brewer, and Old Town. First, a little background. In 2003, I bid a fond farewell to a radio station that had diverted all of my attention for about 17 years. It's right across the hall. With a little time on my hands, I started working on a project that would maybe bring a few adventure tourists into the state, targeted at travelers who might like to experience Maine's abundance of wildlife, particularly birds. My timing was accidental, but strangely fortuitous. Just about that exact same time, Governor John Baldacci organized a Blaine House conference on Maine's natural resources, looking for ways to strengthen the economy through better marketing of Maine's abundant natural gifts. It was aimed at marine resources, agriculture, and forestry, and a large segment on natural resource-based tourism, exactly the kind of thing I was looking to better promote. So I went to the conference. Within a short time, I was invited to serve in the Maine Nature-Based Tourism Initiative Task Force and spent the next 6 years helping to craft improvements to tourism development and promotion, especially in the rural areas of the state. Meanwhile, I started my own small guiding company, and I focused those adventures up in the woods and down east. And so it is that I've been to many sporting camps and worked with many innkeepers. When you're in those rural areas of Maine, you've got to do things differently.
I would have to say that it's adventure-based tourism.
Lori Cormier owns and operates Big Moose Inn and Cabins in Millinocket.
We have a large number of folks who are rafters, we have hikers, we have moose photographers, we have kayakers, birders, folks that are here to just explore the area, just riding up and down the roads looking for moose.
Lori has been a rafting guide. She's completely comfortable in the outdoors and grew up serving adventure tourists because Big Moose Inn has been around a long time in her family.
My parents purchased it in 1974. It's been in my family now for 41 years, and it's 4 generations if you count the grandchildren setting the tables in the evenings in the summertime. Previously to that, the Woodworth family owned it as their family home for 35 years and ran Millinocket Lake camps out of here. My mom was the one who had the idea to turn it into an inn. We have since added on over the last 20 years. We now have 15 rooms upstairs, 2 large dining rooms, and with a seating capacity of 80 folks. And we also have the Loose Moose Bar and Grill. Well, my mom originally was making homemade soups every day on a cook stove in the living room and dining room area. And when my family stopped providing, chefs and cooks amongst each other, we had to hire a chef. And he cooked on Nantucket Island previously to coming here, and he's actually been a chef here for 13 years. Mateo Proctor is the chef at the time. He does a wonderful job.
It's one of the things that shocks visitors. The food at Big Moose Inn is incredible. You don't expect fine cuisine on the edge of Maine's working forest. But I find this time and again in the remote corners of northern Maine. Meals aren't just good, they're awesome. Some of the best food I've chowed down on was in sporting camps and base camps like this. It's a thing of pride. Lunches are good too, which is good to know because often there isn't any other food.
We let them know that ahead of time because lots of folks expect there to be a store in Baxter Park, that they can, and facilities, and obviously there are none. And so we let them know that, if they're going to pack a lunch or that we could provide a lunch, you need to bring plenty of water because there is absolutely nothing beyond here. We're the last Wi-Fi, the last running water, the last real bed, the last gas, you name it.
On the days I'm at the Big Moose Inn with my own tour, there is another group here. A bunch of guys who are on a moose photography tour. To look at them and the way they acted and dressed, you could easily mistake them for hunters. But that is, in fact, what they are, with camera gear way more expensive than hunting gear, and that's saying a lot. With the invention of digital photography and the improvement in optical lenses, I've been watching an explosion in adventure photography. These guys are after moose. Now, some of those with me are after birds. Nowadays, people have their own websites to show off their skills, and there are online services like Picasa and Flickr. Photography has gotten really big even in the wildest areas of Maine. So here's another fact of life for adventure tourism innkeepers. They're a long way from Bangor. On several of my tours this year, I've had people with flight delays. Getting a late cab or bus to a coastal resort at midnight isn't nearly as hard as getting a ride to a distant sporting camp. Up in these parts, innkeepers have to be flexible. But frankly, I still haven't seen this anywhere else.
We have what you call in-sitters. They're the ones that are here on the couch from 10 o'clock at night until 10 in the morning. They greet the latecomers, direct them to their cabins or their room. They're also the first ones up in the morning when it comes time for coffee. There's a step that creaks up at the top, and the minute that they hear that, they get the coffee pot going and take care of you as far as a glorified continental and with a hot side. Typically, it's our homemade cinnamon bread French toast, blueberry pancakes, or our Moose McMuffin.
Now, picture this. The innkeepers sleep on the couch, ready to help anyone at any time. And they're up with the first guest to make breakfast, no matter how early they need it. These could be folks getting ready to climb Katahdin, paddle the local waterways, or in my case, get a whole bunch of bird watchers into the field first thing in the morning when the birds are singing. Hard duty? Well, I asked a couple of them.
Yeah, it's not too bad. You just expect to wake up early. If it's hot out, it's harder to sleep, or like the bugs, you kind of have to swat them away. But when it gets warmer, you just put a fan in front of your face, and then you don't notice.
They all take turns.
I get to do this a couple times a week, usually. About 3 times a week. 3 nights a week. It's fine. I get enough sleep. I'm a morning person, so it works out good.
They do have to get up in the middle of the night to help guests, but actually not too often.
Only once or twice that's happened. Not very often.
It's that breakfast call first thing in the morning.
Yeah, usually in between 5 and 6 is the earliest I get up.
Today's episode of Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine explores adventure tourism the way it's done in the more remote areas of Maine, far from the lobsters and lighthouses. I'm at the Big Moose Inn in Millinocket, where I bring all the tours I lead into Baxter State Park and up to the headwaters of the Allagash. I've got my crowd up early, pounding coffee and dining on cinnamon French toast, and we'll be out the door in moments. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Maine's biggest industry is tourism, but that doesn't mean we do it the same way throughout the state. Sure, most tourists go to the coast for lobsters and lighthouses. Some go to the lakes, a few go to the mountains, very few go to the woods. Each of those experiences is different, and when you're the owner of a sporting camp, lodge, or inn in the northern Maine neck of the woods, you don't do things the way they do in Bahaba. You're part innkeeper, part outfitter. I've got one of my own tours going on up in the working forest. I've got a bunch of birders from all over the eastern seaboard. Last week I had 2 groups from Virginia and California. They're all here to see this. Maine has some special birds in the northern part of the state that you don't find south of Bangor. There are a couple of rare woodpeckers, a brown chickadee, and these, spruce grouse. We're walking a logging road, I know, and there they are, a whole family of grouse. And then another right near them, mamas and babies. Female spruce grouse right down here. If you look at the rocks.
Right in front of the...
He's going to walk back up.
The bush, the green bush, there's another baby sitting right underneath there.
A baby. Look at that. See it. Look at that. Young.
Like whimpering.
Young grouse. Excellent.
You see a baby?
Yeah, it's right under that bush.
Oh, well, your angle is different. Under that. Hackmatack.
Hackmatack, yeah.
And you can hear another one, the baby over on this side who did make it across the road.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Look at that. He's got at least one chick on one side and one on the other.
One on the other, yeah.
At least.
Oh, there's the chick on the rock.
Yep. Here comes the little chicklet.
If you're doing it right, guests don't even know how much work goes into making their Northern Maine experience an incredible adventure. Back to Lori Cormier at the Big Moose Inn. We talked about her inn-sitters, but Lori didn't mention that even though she is the owner, she also takes her turn sleeping on the couch all night, ready to help guests with anything, anytime. When I grabbed her for this story, she was in the kitchen washing dishes.
People don't work for me. People work with me, because if it wasn't for them, there wouldn't be me. I guess it's just the way it is and always has been. And if you think about it, you always think that nobody can do it like you can. But with the staff that I have, boy, they sure can.
Like most inns and sporting camps, there are a variety of accommodation options. There are no standard hotel rooms.
Well, when folks call looking for accommodations, we typically say, are you looking for cabins, camping, or in-rooms? We have a variety of en-suites that have their own private baths, or you can, for those that are on a budget, you can get a room with a shared bath. They all include breakfast if you're staying in the inn. Cabins typically are anywhere from 2 to 22 if you're looking for that home cooking, where you can do your own housekeeping. Everything is provided, pots, pans, dishes, linens. The only thing we don't provide are bath towels, so you've got it all. And camping, we have 3 campgrounds. One is a little bit more for RVs. The other is a little bit more secluded for that private camping feeling. And then we have our remote camping, which absolutely no lights and just privies.
If you walk down the path to Millinocket Lake, you might be able to get one bar on your cell phone. But mostly there's no cell phone service in the edge of Baxter State Park. But there is Wi-Fi, and you can learn more from the inn's website.
We have a great website. We have www.bigmoosecabins.com. If you're looking to find us, all of our accommodations are shown and listed. We have telephone number of 207-723-8391, and also our toll-free number is listed on that website as well. Word of mouth. That's been a big help. Folks, that have come have recommended it to other people, and they come from Indiana and Ohio and everywhere because other people have told them about it.
So right here over this green limb that's right in front of us here, there's, if you count 1, 2, 3 spruce tree branches to the right in the back.
We're in Baxter State Park, about 2 miles beyond Osadahunk Field Campground. This is the time of year when all the babies are out of the nest and begging for food.
It's a young boreal chickadee just begging.
This is one of those birds that you don't find south of Bangor. Now, you know the black-capped chickadee. It's the Maine state bird. But there's another chickadee in Maine. It's brown. He's out of the nest only a short time ago.
Yeah, you can see down.
Oh, yeah. And this little baby is trying hard to be heard and not seen.
You can see if you get on it, you can actually see the different colored gait of the bird.
Yeah, and around his head especially.
And then when it opens its mouth, it's all yellow around the bill.
Adventure tourists face a challenge that you wouldn't even think about in Old Orchard Beach: gasoline. Before heading into Baxter State Park, fill up in Millinocket. If you forget, turn around and hope you make it back to Northwoods Trading Post before you run out. It's the last gas, and it's the last chance for other things an adventure tourist might forget.
Ice, definitely bug repellent, bends, and something to remember the area by.
Tom Bell was born and raised in the Katahdin area and started his outdoor career 22 years ago as a whitewater rafting guide.
I guided in the area for years. I was a ranger at Chimney Pond, and the opportunity for private ownership came about, my wife and I jumped at the chance to own the store that leads to the North Maine woods.
Tom became a park ranger in Baxter State Park 9 years ago, first running A-Ball Campground, later becoming a backcountry ranger at the Chimney Pond Campground. Northwoods Trading Post started off life as the Millinocket Lake store back in 1948. 3 years ago, Tom and his wife Sandy bought it. Here it is again. The big surprise about a small outfitter store on the edge of the Maine Northwoods is the food. The sandwich counter is better than you'd find practically anywhere. The cranberry walnut chicken salad is my favorite. But I'm also a sucker for the curry chicken salad sandwich and the blue cheese and onion chicken salad sandwich. I asked why a small trading post would have better food than most of the sandwich shops in Maine.
2 words. My wife. She is from southern Maine and quote-unquote foodie, and she would have nothing other than the best.
Sandy was born in southern Maine, and it was the mountains that brought her north. They met skiing at Sugarloaf and discovered a shared passion for snowshoeing, hiking, and fishing. In fact, if you drop into the trading post in the afternoon, you probably won't find Tom or Sandy there. Odds are, they're fishing. Otherwise, it's Sandy whipping up the food and treats. So what's the difference between a gift shop in Camden and the kind of souvenirs you can get up in the Maine woods? Well, good question. Certainly you can get postcards of lighthouses and stuffed toy lobsters anywhere in Maine. Every store sells moose mementos, even in areas of the state that don't have moose. But you get up here.
I would say a lot would be a lot of the stickers and magnets that show Katahdin in the area. Our Baxter State Park replica. Trail signs sell very well, and it's all things Katahdin, really. The A-Ball trail sign has been selling a lot this year, even though it's closed. But, of course, Knife Edge is probably one of the most sought after, or the Baxter Peak sign that has the elevation.
Every gift shop in Maine has the generic joke T-shirts about mosquitoes and black flies. But you go into the Northwoods Trading Post.
We have one that says switchbacks are for sissies. We have a new one this year that says I walked the edge. And it has a photo of the knife edge on it, and a nice little logo in the upper left corner.
So we walk back to the beer cooler. Is there a difference in what kind of beer tourists might buy in Ogunquit and what they might buy in Millinocket?
Tying in with the theme of Baxter State Park, Baxter Brewery sells very well up here, and we do try to hold a lot of different Maine brews, Gritties, Garys, Shipyard. That would be the best. Other than, of course, the local favorite, Bud Light. The blue can.
I don't know exactly what this says, but whenever I find a discarded beer can on the side of a logging road, it's almost always Bud Light. There's a lot of nickels sitting in the dirt up there in the woods. Coming up, my own tour goes after moose and ends up getting bear. We're exploring adventure tourism today, the kind that Acadia visitors will never know they're missing up in the North Maine woods. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Saturday mornings at 9, Sunday mornings at 8 on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Today's show is about adventure tourism. How we do it up in the woods is a little different than what happens along the coast. Inns are different, dining is different, adventures are different. I get to see it firsthand because I lead tours into the woods, far from where most tourists go, sometimes where even Mainers don't much go. This tour is Chasing Birds. We're sharing the Big Moose Inn with a moose photography tour, a bunch of folks who are hiking Baxter State Park, and a handful of people with canoes and kayaks strapped to the roof. On this birding tour, I've got a co-leader, Seth Benz. He's from Belfast. I could trace my interest in birds back to the first grade when I'd stand on my tiptoes to watch goldfinches out the window. For Seth, it was also very young.
While I was in grade school and then again in middle school, the school district that I went to in Berks County, Pennsylvania, was very close to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. And we went on field trips in 4th and 7th grade. So those were 2 different exposures to this wonderful place, this mountain near my house where birds of prey would fly down the mountainside or ridge line every autumn. That all was augmented by just before 7th grade when my father brought home an injured rough-legged hawk, and we kept it at our home, illegally I might add. because we didn't know any better, and we fed it all the wrong things. Unfortunately, the bird had been shot by some hunter, and then one day a guy came along and said it was illegal, and my father, now mind you, he had built a pen for this. We had a cage in our backyard, so I was the kid on the block with the cage with the hawk, so there was some popularity with that. One day my father gathered up the hawk and me, and we took us to Hawk Mountain, where I met the then curator Maurice Brune, who's a legend in conservation history. He and his wife Irma were two people who stood in front of people who came to that mountain ridge to shoot hawks right out of the sky, and they often faced people with shotguns and turned them away, and essentially were behind the movement that traded the shooting of hawks into the watching of hawks. So from shotgun to binocular to study hawk migration.
We'll get back to Seth in a moment, but right now it's early morning and we're standing next to Sandy Stream Pond, next to Roaring Brook Campground at Baxter State Park. Every morning moose come out to feed. In all the times I've been to this spot first thing in the morning, I've only missed moose once. Twice, if you count this morning. It's perfect conditions. Clear, no wind, warm. We're told the moose was here a few minutes ago. While we're waiting, Seth directs our attention to a spot far up Katahdin, above the tree line. Through binoculars, you can make out a black spot. It's a bear, a big one. Most people wouldn't notice it way up there, but we've got spotting scopes. So you got the bear?
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much.
Oh yeah, there he is. Oh, you can zoom in more.
Mm-hmm. Check in the scope. The scope, you actually can sort of see some
really
definition.
It almost starts to look like a bear.
Yeah. You can't tell it's a bear until you look at the scope.
That's all I was getting was a dog. I'm like, that's three shadows.
Well, he's got his head down eating a lot, so.
Eating berries.
He really is. You can see his muzzle too.
I went from Hawk Mountain to Audubon.
Once again, Seth Benz.
Via the Audubon Expedition Institute, which is an environmental education program that traveled the country going to hot spots where conservation controversies were happening, like Forks, Washington, and the spotted owl, and up into Newfoundland and Labrador where harp seals were being killed. So being on the front line of some of those things, at least in an academic kind of guise, gave me great insight into what was happening in the country regarding conservation, and it just increased my interest in sort of the human side of all of these things, as well as because the wildlife component was sort of embedded. I was always interested in observation and all those sorts of things. And after studying with the Audubon Expedition Institute, I became the director. From there, I was invited to Hog Island, where I eventually became the director of that facility. Now, Hog Island is a place where people come from all over the country for a week-long residential stay to study ornithology or natural history or botany.
Hog Island has quite a history. It was established in Bremen in 1936. One of its first naturalists was Roger Torrey Peterson, who in the whole history of birding may rank only below James J. Audubon as the most famous. He invented the modern field guide that did much to make birdwatching so popular in America. Hog Island lies just offshore in Bremen, and most of the original facilities at the Audubon camp remain unchanged in 80 years. Eventually, Seth moved on to other things, and then back to the same other things, revisiting his days as an Acadia National Park ranger.
So I reapplied, and I got a position at on the Schoodic side of Acadia National Park. And after 6 months there, I was asked if I was interested in a fellowship, during which I wrote up a job description for my current position, which is the Director of Bird Ecology.
So how did I come together with this guy to offer professional tours into the North Woods? After all, I'm just a radio guy with a passion for the outdoors, for birds, and for the wilder parts of Maine. enough to create the Maine Birding Trail as a nature tourism promotion product for the state?
Well, here at the Institute, one of the provisions of the job was that I was instructed to create some revenue-generating programs. And I would say that the twist on the revenue-generating programs here at Schoodic Institute is that we're very interested in citizen science. I mean, that's really our calling card. Then I sought out here in the state of Maine one of the programs that I think is essential to make birding sort of a major thrust in the state, and that's the Maine Birding Trail. I hooked up with that fellow that runs that, and when you were interested in doing those programs, I was pretty excited, and I thought that would be the fastest way to make our programs at least get some notoriety, and certainly through your website we are gaining, and you've helped a tremendous deal in helping the Schoodic Institute at least set a foundation for its interest in becoming a birding hotspot.
And here's the thing, I don't do mild, I do wild. So if you're partnering with me for tours, you're going into the woods and up the coast and out to sea, because that's where the adventure is. We'll get back into Baxter State Park in a few minutes and then jump on a whale watch boat later in the show. But up next, we go to Augusta to see how the state looks at this whole adventure tourism thing. This is Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket with Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Today's show is about adventure tourism. What is it? Where is it? How is it different than sitting on a beach in Ogunquit or photographing a lighthouse in Bass Harbor? What do the innkeepers and sporting camp owners have to do differently? For that, we go to Augusta. With me is Phil Savignano in the Maine Office of Tourism. Phil has lived this. He's led adventure tours for L.L. Bean in his previous life. Welcome back, Phil.
It's great to be here.
So when you're going north, where does wild begin?
For a lot of folks visiting Maine, wild begins in Kittery.
You cross the line, and there's a beware of moose sign.
No, it's they've come to Maine because they picture Maine as being wild, and so for a lot of folks, when the road stops being 4-lane to 2-lane, Maine has become wild, and so it's wild and adventure are things that are always determined by the visitor, because everybody has their different perspective of what that could be all about. Those of us who live here have a totally different perspective. We can't kind of enforce that on the visitors, but when there's no line in the middle of the road anymore, they feel like they've really gone to a remote place. And that happens all over the state. But for folks who are going inland and getting past kind of the infrastructure that you have, support stuff along the coastline, when you get in, it really becomes almost like, as an innkeeper or those folks, to become educators.
You've got to get your people prepared to experience what they're about to go through.
Yeah, they don't know what they don't know, and so it's really helpful to from a guiding perspective to say, gee, if you're coming to Maine, here are the things you're going to need for this trip, and let them know if they're from bird watching if and I know it from the old days of guiding moose trips. When you tell them bring a bug net and you're going to be out in the bogs in June, you really have to explain why and why it's not just a suggestion. It's an important piece to have. Or folks are traveling into Maine and they do want to get off the main roads, off the pavement, they got to understand that there's some commitment to having. They need to know that the spare tire is important. To have full tank of gas is important. Where they can be. We've been really lucky over the years working with different groups, and the Keeping Maine's Forest Group has been able to provide a brochure that talks a little bit about being on private lands, and so people really understand that unlike the West, we have a fair amount of public lands here, but there's a lot of our land. Most of our land is private lands, and so if you're going to go venturing in there are some rules and responsibilities you need to have, and so we've created this piece for frontline staff to let the folks know when they're leaving their bed and breakfast or their hunting lodge that this is a whole different adventure out here.
I tell you where I fall down as a guide regularly is I'll go out in the woods with these people and say, oh, the bugs aren't that bad today. And they're dying. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm used to it, and the bugs really don't affect me very much, and they do some of my clients.
I always told folks, if you can hear them buzzing, you're safe.
Yes.
It's when it's quiet that you know you're going to be bitten.
Mm-hmm. Well, from Bangor to Seattle, most states have northern forest along the Canadian border, but it's really Maine's ocean that is the winning variable, I think, when we're attracting tourists. But that, in a way, means that our forest gets slighted by the tourism, well, not the industry, but by the visitors who come here. They want to go see the lobsters and lighthouses and don't even know about the lakes and mountains and forests we have.
Well, we've gotten a really great reputation. I just came from an Adventure Travel Trade Association conference, and they were talking, people are talking, starting to say the term wild is what people are looking for. They're looking for a wild experience, and we're starting to get recognized in the Northeast of still having some great wild country and some great wild experiences. I think the exposure that we got a year or so ago with the Thoreau Wabanaki tour really re-emphasized the fact that boy, the landscape hasn't changed much in northern Maine in the last 150 years, and you can still have that really great experience when you get back there. And so we work hard at kind of getting the word out, and hopefully folks realize that they can have almost similar adventures from the coast that they have inland, and the reason that where else can you go windjammering and whitewater rafting in the same day? I mean, there's not many places. There really are not many places in the country that you can have that experience.
Yeah.
So that
well, to some extent, the media, the industry doesn't help us out very much, because can you think of any movie or TV show ever that wasn't located on the Maine coast? Maybe a Stephen King movie, but I can't think of anything else.
Oh, I don't dare wade in on that one. Because I'm sure there have been a lot of movies about the woods.
Even Hawkeye Pierce from MASH was from Crabapple Cove.
Well, yeah,
right?
yeah. We do have that kind of Yankee coastal reputation. Yeah. But and actually, there was one produced a couple years ago about a rooster in the potato fields.
Right.
Yeah, and it got really great acclaim. I'm going to go blank on the name of it, but we, so even the movie makers are starting to explore inland a little bit.
Well, the whole tourism experience is different in the woods. On the way to your hotel room in Ogunquit, you might pick up some Chardonnay and Brie. If you go into the woods up north to your campsite, you're bringing in propane and bug dope, and so the experience is just a tiny bit different. And the folks who operate tourism businesses up there must be prepared for it.
Well, we've worked with a number of groups and working on the hospitality training throughout the state of Maine. But it's again from the business owner's perspective, it's really letting folks know what to expect when they get there. So if you're honest with folks, it may be the expectation. We certainly know that our travelers that are coming to Maine now like stuff that's off the beaten path, a little quirky. They want to have that local cultural piece. It's the folks who are coming here really are open to what we're offering them. But it as we said before, it's the education piece that when you're looking for a place to stay, if you're Googling and you want to get into a remote camp on a lake, and you dial those things in, that when you find one and you get that information that says, if you want to have a really great glass of wine tonight, bring it with you.
Yeah.
But
it's amazing how many sporting camps and good inns up there have great wine selection.
No, there was some great, amazing food. And so we do know that, boy, folks, no matter what reason to come into Maine, number one thing is they love food.
Yep.
And good food is a home run all the way around.
Yep.
So you can get that whether you're on the coast or in the woods.
Yeah, and much more in the woods than people would realize.
Yeah.
Why do visitors to Bar Harbor think they're going to see a moose? It's like, again, one of those educational things about telling visitors what to expect.
Well, people don't realize, I don't think, initially when they come to Maine, how big Maine is.
Yeah.
They don't realize that we're as big as all the other New England states put together, and we're huge. We're the size of Ireland. I mean, we're a big place, and so I think I was up in Acadia over the past weekend, and my son was driving up on the way up there, and he was in Ellsworth, and he saw a black bear crossing the road. So there's interesting wildlife up there, and you might see a moose. You never could tell in Acadia, but
inns and sporting camps certainly also have to act almost as outfitters.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of these people ready to make you brown bag lunches and provide you with the amenities you're going to need when you go away for the entire day and just disappear.
Yeah. Well, one of the great things on the inland folks, most of them are connected with Maine guides, and there's nothing that matches having a guided experience. It's nice to go and poke around yourself, but you learn so much more. You have so much better an experience if you've got a guided experience. And I would say that the majority of the wilderness lodges and sporting camps now are operated probably by Maine guides, if not having one kind of on staff. And so it's just the best way to see the state.
I'm trying to think of any of those inns or sporting camps that aren't operated by guides. I think they all are. So where does the Maine Office of Tourism see tourism going in those rural, on the edge of wild areas, the northern areas? Is it growing, shrinking, changing?
No, it actually is growing. In our last research we had from 2014, the Kennebec Valley region and the Lakes and Mountains region saw very impressive growth. And so we know folks are starting to work their way in off the coast and working inland, and that's a real positive sign. We also see that those folks have a younger market and a lot more active market coming, and that's really what we want to see is because we have such a great reputation of people coming back year after year after year. If we can get some new folks coming in and younger, they'll last longer.
Hook them
now.
Bill Savignano, Maine Office of Tourism, and an adventure tour leader himself. Coming up, this particular adventure tour shifts to the coast. The Schoodic Institute is headquartered at Schoodic Point on the campus of the Schoodic Education and Research Center. It used to be a Navy base, and you needed a badge to see it. Not anymore. We'll call it home for 2 nights while we explore that part of Acadia that gets only 10% of the visitors that the Bar Harbor side does. This is Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchesne's Wild Maine. Before we move over to Schoodic Point to wrap up today's adventure tour, I'd like to call your attention to something going on next weekend. The Penobscot Bay Carvers and Artists hold a Maine Coast competition Saturday and Sunday in Belfast. Bird carvings, duck decoys, wildlife carvings, photography, and paintings, all inside the boathouse on the Belfast waterfront. It'll be 9 to 5 on Saturday and 9 to 4 on Sunday. That's the Maine Coast competition to the Penobscot Bay Carvers and Artists in the boathouse on the Belfast waterfront next weekend. Admission is free. Now, if you're just joining us, you've missed a lot. We're laying out the difference between the lobsters and lighthouses tourism that most tourists get in Maine and the kind of adventure tourism you can only get if you know how to get up into the woods and mountains and the down east area above Acadia. In bits and pieces, you've been on a tour that got up as far as Chamberlain Lake and the Allagash and into Baxter State Park. Now, we shift to the coast at Schoodic Point. I'm driving the tour van. My co-leader Seth Benz is explaining what the Schoodic Education and Research Center is now and what it was as a Navy base, paying attention to
submarines in the North Atlantic from before the Cold War, through the Cold War, through to World War II, all those things, all the way up until 2002 when they decommissioned it. And from 2002 to roughly 2009 or 10, it sort of was trying to get fixed up in fits and starts, and then the TARP money came through, and it was all finished in 18 months. So they're still working on the punch list, which means that after it was deemed complete and we had the grand opening, there's, maintenance things to fix up, and they're still working on some of that. But for the most part, it's completed, and now we're like almost a thriving conference center, research and learning center. We're one of 19 in the country.
This building was all...
Yeah, that building was part of the trade. This Navy base was over on MDI. Rockefeller did not want, John D. that is, did not want a Navy base in the national park. So he gave his personal architect some kind of little bit of money, and that building was a gift. Yeah. And in exchange for moving the Navy base over here. So that's been the Navy base's officers' quarters, administrative stuff. And then in Winter Harbor is where the enlisted people stay and all that sort of stuff.
So we're now at Schoodic Point, looking out at a freak of nature. These waters are cold. Colder than they should be. The Gulf Stream bypasses Maine. Instead, a cold Labrador current flows down from the north and filters into our waters. Because of that, there's a lot of oxygen in the water and a lot of food, starting with the building blocks of the food chain, plankton. That brings in the fish and the whales and the birds. It's what makes the Maine Ocean both rich and unusual. Now, I'm kind of lucky here. I've got Seth Benz as my co-leader, an Acadia National Park interpretive ranger who can explain that when the glaciers were here, they dropped a lot of sediment out there in the ocean that created this cold water cul-de-sac.
So in here, there's a bunch of buried mountains because the glacier was over the top of us by 1.5 to 2 miles, and it went pretty far out, deposited all these things out here. and sort of made this an inland sea. The Gulf of Maine is kind of a sea within the Atlantic Ocean. And all of these things that you see here are where underwater islands or mountaintop islands come close to the surface, and we get lots of upwelling. This cold water current is very, very important. But all of this is changing because of the influence of the Gulf Stream and the rising warming temperatures. And what happens is plankton is beginning to change and fail, and food fish like herring and hake and those things that the puffins and terns really, really like are sometimes here and sometimes not. Lately the birds have been having to go farther distance to get their food to bring back to their young. Three summers ago, it was the wrong size fish. They were getting butterfish, which are from the south, that were big and sand dollar shaped, versus the skinny finger length type fish that they really want to get down the young birds. And so there was massive failure of all of the seabird islands, especially the puffins and terns and those things. So what we're seeing is great fluctuations with this stuff. One researcher from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says that the turning point came in 2004. So tracking this for as long as they've been tracking it, there was a decided change in the temperature, the overall average temperature of the Gulf of Maine. Now it's said to be the fastest rising body of water temperature-wise in the entire world. So the ecosystem is changing extremely rapidly.
In the long run, and even the short run, this is bad news for Maine, because all of our critters here are here because the water is cold, starting with lobsters. We've been seeing entire colonies of seabirds failing to produce young in recent seasons, so we're starting to pay even more attention to bird sex, which is kind of handy when this tour group is standing there at Schoodic Point watching a flyby of common eiders. They're the largest ducks in North America and an abundant breeder along the Maine coast.
So here we go. Here's a small flock of common eider.
Common eider.
Yes,
all males. Well, 90% males.
All males. Those dark ones also had white on them, so they're just. The males leave the nest after copulation. The males pretty much give up on the chick rearing business, and they gather right at the beginning. They gather in really large rafts and will move offshore, and they go through like a 17 to 21 day flightless period where they molt their flight feathers and literally cannot fly. So it's possible, although it's just a tad on the early side, that tomorrow we could begin to see some of that activity. So when you see eiders that can't fly, obviously they paddle across the surface, they run, they look very uncoordinated. Schoodic Education and Research Center exists to connect science, education, parks, and people in partnership with Acadia National Park. Schoodic Education and Research Center is the actual campus, but it is one of 19 research and learning centers across the country, all of which are affiliated with national parks. Prior to becoming the institute, the campus was, in fact, a Navy base. It existed as such from roughly the 1930s all the way to 2002, and its mission was to catalog movements of submarines through the North Atlantic. At least that's my understanding of it. To become involved or a supporter of the Schoodic Education and Research Center and the Institute is to perhaps participate in one of our many programs. It's also a conference center, so folks come here for all kinds of different meetings. Our major work on the research side has to do with phenology, the study of the timing of when things happen in nature. So for instance, my particular work with the Bird Ecology Lab has to do with matching up insects, plants, and birds that seek insects on plants, and also fruits on those plants. And so we're connecting all of those things, studying the timing of how those things happen. To get in touch with the Institute, you could go to schoodicinstitute.org, and you'll see all of the programs, all the offerings, and you can get attached to a newsletter that the Institute puts out on a monthly basis.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Larry. I'll be your captain, like Julia said. Looks like we have a beautiful day for cruising around the Gulf of Maine looking for wildlife. The waves today, I mean, you folks are real lucky. They're only about a foot or two high, which is pretty small for this area.
We finish up the tour on board Bar Harbor Whale Watch.
We're going to be headed probably 20 or 30 miles offshore today. That's pretty far out in the ocean. A little bit about the whales. This is kind of earlier in our season. We had a cold winter up here this past winter, lots of snow, and the water temperature hasn't warmed up a lot yet. It's still below 50 degrees in a lot of places out there. So the whales are a little harder to find because of that. We had whales on both of our trips yesterday. Hopefully we'll have the same thing for us today.
Everybody on board is looking for whales except us. We're looking for rare and unusual birds, and we find some, including one I had never seen before, a Cory shearwater that normally nests in the Mediterranean Sea. I guess it is getting warmer out there. That's it. Remember, this show and all previous shows are archived on the web at 929theticket.com. It's brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Dice Arts, EBS, and Supercuts in Bangor, Brewer, and Old Town on Sports Radio 929 The Ticket.